Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump finishing off what he calls what's left of the Iranian regime on day 19 of Operation Epic Fury, and the White House's message to NATO countries. Israel says it killed Iran's intelligence minister in an overnight strike as Iran retaliates against Israel and neighboring Gulf countries. Intelligence leaders testified before a Senate committee on worldwide threats to the U.S. what they say about the threat of Iran amid the ongoing war. Senator Mark Wayne Mullin of Oklahoma calling on Congress to restore funding for Homeland Security during his confirmation hearing to lead the department, and an emotional back and forth between his colleagues with some support and pushback from both sides of the aisle. More on President Trump's pick to replace Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill exposing our vulnerable medical supply chain. The Chinese Communist Party has strategically pushed the U.S. out of the market in order to leverage life-saving medicines. We have highlights. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell announcing today the U.S. Central Bank is holding the federal funds rate the same at 3.5% to 3.75%. We discussed the decision with a bank rate analyst. NTD is releasing an exclusive documentary on the untold story of Shen Yun Performing Arts. Find out more about this highly anticipated film.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
The Trump administration's intelligence leaders say the Iranian regime appears to be intact but largely degraded due to Operation Epic Fury. They're warning senators the regime could still pose a national security threat. Here's more.
The IC assesses that if a hostile regime survives, it will likely seek to begin a years-long effort to rebuild its military, missiles, and UAV forces. Prior to Operation Epic Fury, the IC assesses Iran was trying to recover from the severe damage to its nuclear infrastructure sustained during the 12-day war and continued to refuse to comply with its nuclear obligations with the IAEA, refusing them access to key facilities. The IC assesses that China, Russia, and North Korea see the United States as a strategic competitor and potential adversary. Iran has long viewed the U.S. as an adversary and is engaged in active conflict with the U.S.
Officials, including Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and FBI Director Kash Patel, are testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee. This is the annual hearing on worldwide threats to the United States. The hearing is focusing on the war in Iran. Lawmakers are saying they want more information about the war. Committee Chair Tom Cotton asking about the possibility of Iran developing ICBMs. Here's how Ratcliffe responds.
You're right to be concerned about Iran's development of longer-range ballistic missiles, Senator. If Iran were allowed to develop at the IRBM ranges, which is 3,000 kilometers, it would threaten most of Europe. And yes, as you mentioned, we know that Iran is gaining experience in these larger, more powerful booster technologies through its so-called Space Launch Vehicle program. If left unimpeded, yes, Senator, they would have the ability to range missiles to the continental U.S.
Intelligence officials highlight China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran as posing the biggest threats to the U.S. They say these regimes are actively and advancing their capabilities in the fields of conventional weapons, nuclear weapons, cybersecurity, AI, and more. They also note other national security threats such as Islamic terrorism, drug trafficking, organized crime, and open borders.
And thank you for joining us. President Trump finishing off the Iranian regime. He's also sending a warning shot at NATO countries over the Strait of Hormuz. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu at the White House. Mari, good afternoon. What's the latest from President Trump on securing the strait?
Hey, Don, good afternoon. Yeah, that's right. And President Trump is warning NATO countries over the Strait of Hormuz. He's saying that the U.S. economy doesn't depend on using the strait, and floating the idea that countries that do rely on it for their oil and for their economies should be the ones, quote, responsible for securing it. The president yesterday said that NATO is making a, quote, very foolish mistake as he criticized them for not wanting to get involved militarily in Operation Epic Fury, despite in theory agreeing with the U.S. strikes against Iran. He also added that the U.S. no longer needs or desires help from those NATO countries, while also mentioning countries like China, Japan, Australia, and South Korea in the same breath. And here's the White House today. Take a look.
One of the president's guiding principles is fairness, and he's long called out NATO for being what he believes sometimes an unfair alliance for the American taxpayer and our American military. You look at the billions of dollars we spend housing U.S. troops on the soil of our NATO ally countries. That's a benefit to them because it serves as a deterrent from our adversaries around the world. If you look at our unfair trade deals with many of our NATO allies, the president and his trade team have obviously worked to rectify those new trade deals with the UK, with the EU.
And Don, this is coming on day 19 of Operation Epic Fury, with the U.S. Central Command this morning announcing that the U.S. has hit more than 7,800 Iranian targets and more than 120 Iranian vessels have been damaged or destroyed since the operation began. And the White House, meanwhile, continues to tout the progress of the operation, while also slamming the counterterrorism official Joe Kent for claims that Iran posed no imminent threat to the U.S., which were claims that he made yesterday inside of his resignation letter. President Trump responded to the resignation saying that Kent was, quote, very weak on security, and that it's a good thing that he's out. And Press Secretary Leavitt had to say this. Take a look.
He was not someone who was involved in the presidential daily brief, part of the president's intelligence briefings over the last several months. Have not seen him here at the White House for quite some time, and the president feels it's deeply disappointing that after the president gave him an opportunity in this administration to serve the American people, that he would resign with a letter filled with falsehoods, accusing the president of the United States by being controlled by a foreign country. That's both insulting and laughable all at the same time. The president is the leader of the most powerful country and military in the world. Nobody tells him what to do. He makes decisions based on what's in the best interest of this country.
And Don, the White House is now confirming that China has agreed to postpone President Trump's expected Beijing trip, which was originally supposed to be in a couple weeks at the end of March. The White House saying that they'll announce those dates later. And today, the only thing on President Trump's schedule is that he's in Delaware attending the dignified transfer of the 6 American service members who were killed last week in the crash of a refueling aircraft. Back to you.
All right, Mari, thank you.
The intensity of the attacks in Iran is increasing. We are in the midst of the decisive victory. After the powerful assassinations of senior regime officials, the de facto leader of Iran, Larijani, and head of the Basij Murder Insurance Organization, Soleimani, the Iranian intelligence minister Khatib, was also assassinated last night, who was in charge of the regime's internal murder and repression system in Iran, and of promoting external threats.
Israel says that Khatib played a significant role during the recent protests throughout Iran, including arresting and killing protesters and leading terrorist activities against Israelis and Americans around the world. The U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned Khatib in 2022. Katz warning of significant surprises across multiple fronts. He says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and himself authorizes the military to target any senior Iranian official. No additional approval would be required for such strikes. At the same time, Iran launching multiple warhead missiles at central Israel. That's in response to Israel's killing of senior official Ali Larijani. 2 people were killed in Tel Aviv. Also today, Iran launching strikes toward Gulf countries, with explosions heard in the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, and interceptions reported in Saudi Arabia. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says a projectile hit its base in the UAE near Dubai. It caused a small fire, but no injuries.
Meanwhile, overnight Israeli strikes hitting central Beirut today. The IDF sent evacuation notices prior to the strike. The IDF releasing a video showing airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. The military says it completed an overnight wave of strikes targeting Hezbollah. And the U.S. military dropping 5,000-pound bunker buster bombs on Iranian missile sites near the Strait of Hormuz. Central Command says the strikes hit harder positioned, housing anti-ship cruise missiles. CENTCOM says those missiles posed a direct threat to international shipping in the region. The strikes come as Iran has effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, blocking traffic through the critical oil route. The U.S. says it will continue targeting Iran's ability to threaten the waterway. And NATO is working to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Member nation Turkey is also deploying a U.S. Patriot missile defense system to a base which hosts U.S. personnel. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest on the international impact of the Iran war.
When it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, I've been in contact with many allies. We all agree, of course, that strait has to open up again.
NATO Chief Mark Rutte saying allies are working on ways to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf. The strait is effectively closed as Iran is threatening to attack any ship trying to pass through. Reopening is crucial as 20% of all global oil trade flows through the strait.
Allies are working together, discussing how to do that. What is the best way to do it? They are working on that collectively to find a way forward.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, NATO is deploying another U.S. Patriot missile defense system to Turkey.
Hava sahamızın ve vatandaşlarımızın güvenliğini sağlamak amacıyla.
In order to ensure the security of our airspace and our citizens, in addition to the measures taken at the national level, another Patriot system is being deployed.
NATO air defense already had to shoot down an incoming Iranian missile after the war started. The system is being deployed to Adana, where a base is located, which also hosts U.S. personnel. And in Brussels, European leaders are set to hold a two-day summit this week.
EU summit this time around was supposed to be on competitiveness. It was supposed to be on different topics. But clearly, we now have the global situation changed. We have the Iran conflict. We have the continuing issue of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The European leaders are set to meet on Thursday and Friday. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Israel's defense minister Israel Katz announced that Iranian intelligence minister Ismail Khatib was killed in an overnight strike in Tehran. Joining us now is Babak Shikarabi, political analyst and founding member of Cyprus the Great Institute. So thank you, first of all, for coming on the show, Babak. Can you just tell us, talk to us a bit more about who this Iranian intelligence minister is? How important was he and what's his role?
Don, thank you for having me. Obviously, this is a very important position within the Islamic Republic regime. The Minister of Intelligence essentially oversees 17 different agencies of intelligence, being the top position, oversight every one of them. So that gives him enormous power and importance within the regime. Also, it's for a few reasons this position and importance of it stands out. Number one, there are only 3 different ministers are there appointed by the supreme leader, and they're not going to go through the whole parliamentary vote of confidence, and they're not nominated by the president. This position was one of them. So it was always and always have been appointed by the supreme leader. More importantly, it was always traditionally a cleric who would fill in that position. But Khatib was different. He joined the intelligence services at a very early age. And after that, he became a cleric. By the age of 30, which he was considered to be a very young cleric, he was fully trusted by Supreme Leader Khamenei, the father. At the age of 30, he became in charge of city of Qom. City of Qom is the holiest Shia city in Iran, and it's also the largest hub of scholarship, of religious scholarship. So at the age of 30, he became in charge of overseeing all the high-ranking ayatollahs in city of Qom, and obviously that gave him enormous amount of influence and power. The reason the head of the intelligence always has to be a cleric was because they could issue a death warrant without going through the whole judicial system. And that would also give him an enormous operational power. So that's another reason that his position was super, super important. What also separates him from his predecessors is that he served in both government of reformists and hardliners. This happened, he was originally appointed when President Raisi was in power and his mysterious helicopter crash. And when Pezeshkian ran for presidency, Supreme Leader Khamenei, the father, appointed Khatib again to serve in Pezeshkian's government, which tells you that at that point, at least, the Supreme Leader couldn't trust anybody else who worked with both factions and at the same time to be trustworthy. That brings us to the point that he was supposed to be, as head of the 17 different intelligence agencies, to be in charge of security for all the regime's elite, including himself. And clearly that shows that there's so much of infiltration within the security agencies of the regime that he couldn't even protect his own life. And now that he's dead, considering that that position has to be only filled in by the Supreme Leader, and obviously we don't know the whereabouts of the Supreme Leader Khamenei, the son, we don't know the condition that he's in, we don't know if he's in comatose or he's disfigured or incapacitated. Nobody, based on their rules and regulation, can appoint the next person. And keep that in mind. He was very close to the Khamenei, the son, the current supreme leader. And losing him obviously creates a vacuum of trust within the regime. They don't know who to choose. If he is actually incapacity to choose the next person, he essentially, just like his father, doesn't have anybody to replace him. And then the last point, Don, is that the regime had the succession plan up to 3 people. What Israel did before eliminating Khatib, they had eliminated his successors, as well as they had completely destroyed the main buildings of Ministry of Intelligence. So all of that together bring a huge challenge for the regime currently. And it is considered a big victory for Israel.
Okay, so I just have 2 follow-up questions to everything you said just now. Obviously, you're outlining how much power Khatib has had during his lifetime. The head of 17 agencies, as you mentioned. So ultimately, what does this mean? What are the consequences for the Iranian regime that he is dead? And the second question is, what does his death mean then for this war overall?
Well, what happens, first of all, just like I heard in your report, for them to exert pressure within the country and outside of the country has been enormously reduced. Replacing him is not going to be an easy task. Somebody that the entire elite of the Islamic Republic can trust is almost impossible. I cannot imagine anybody else that could replace him to be as capable as he was and to be trusted by both sides, by the reformists as well as the hardliners. Right now, from the reports that we hear coming from Iran, is that the IRGC has taken over the security of the Khamenei, the son, the current supreme leader. Nobody knows his whereabouts. And that obviously creates a big challenge. So the next person is going to come is not going to be as qualified as he was. He's not going to be as trusted as he was. And whomever they pick is not going to be trusted by the other side. This, considering the pressure is being applied from outside, war from one hand, and the messages that are coming from President Trump that says that he's ready to talk to whatever faction is ready to talk to him, creates the atmosphere of not trusting one another. So each side may think that the other side is about to come to some sort of a deal with the U.S. and throw the other side under the bus. These are the challenges that are very difficult, create a very difficult situation for the regime.
Okay, I'm wondering if you can provide us a little bit more context here. What exactly is the role of the intelligence ministry in Iran?
I can go on about it for a very long time, Don, but imagine at the age of 30, he was, this person in particular, but also talk about the position. He was in charge of overseeing all the ayatollahs. So all the other ayatollahs, they had somewhat the power to religiously challenge the supreme leader Khamenei, the father. And obviously this guy this person's job is to make sure that no religious person stands up or comes up to anywhere close toward that holy position they believe in for the supreme leader. So that's one thing. So at this point, if that pressure is gone, we have other religious figures that they may come out with the fatwa or decree, and they say this whole is an unholy word. This is against Islam, against Iran, and whatever else they might say. This is going to religiously create a huge problem for the regime and for its legitimacy. So once this position is vacant, all the other ayatollahs, all the other religious figures, they can actually challenge the regime or challenge the supreme leader, unlike before that. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is obviously they were overseeing whatever security measurements was put in place to make sure there's no uprising inside Iran and whatever else they could have done outside of Iran. All of this right now, it seems to be in disarray. That doesn't mean that the security apparatus, they're not going to do what they did before. What we have learned in that previous 18, 19 days is that they kind of dispersed the management of the smaller factions of different ministry to go on without even the head of that ministry. So it is very possible that some of the elements within the security apparatus continue operating based on the old order they had. But that doesn't mean they can go on for a very long time.
Okay, maybe just one or two more questions here. I want to ask you, by your assessment, because Israel has said it's going to continue targeting Iranian leadership. Benjamin Netanyahu said they don't really need approval. They can just go ahead to target these leaders. By your assessment, how close is the Iranian regime and its leadership to being completely dismantled at this point, or how close or how far?
Well, we have to keep that in mind. People inside Iran also are against the regime. They're waiting for an opportunity to come on the street and topple the regime. So we shouldn't be only expecting that by continuation of this war and by Israel or American forces eliminating the head of the Islamic Republic elites, we're going to see the regime fall. The regime might fall when that situation is created for the people to rise up and topple the regime. So that's very possible. At the same time, remember, every time the head of a ministry or whomever on top elite of the regime is eliminated, the mid-ranking officer or the mid-ranking management and the people have the opportunity to kind of distance themselves from the regime and join the people. At the same time, we have Prince Reza Pahlavi, the head of the opposition from outside, that continuously has been sending messages and has been inviting the different member of the regime elite to join this Iranian revolution, and has given them a kind of a amnesty. If they don't have their hands soaked in the blood of Iranian people, they can come to this side and they don't have to worry about what the future holds. And there's going to be a fair trial for everybody. What is also important that he has mentioned that there's not going to be any death sentence in the future Iran. All of that, it creates an environment that the mid-ranking management and officers, they kind of see a light at the end of the tunnel if they can join the other side, join this revolution and topple the regime from within. So there are two different, essentially, power being exerted, one from outside by the war, and every high-ranking political person is being eliminated, and also military people are being eliminated. And from within, you have the Iranian people that they're looking for that opportunity, ready to go. And so all of that together, I believe it's going to end up forcing some of the mid-ranking people to defect and join the people. If I were to give you a time frame, my estimate, my assumption is that within next 2 weeks, we're going to see a huge gap between the different faction of the regime, which is going to lead to essentially their fall.
Okay, well, very comprehensive explanation today. I learned a lot. Thank you for joining us today, Babak.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin, President Trump's pick to replace Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, testifying on the Hill today. Many of the senators speaking highly of Mullin's track record in Congress and his character, while a couple of others, like Senator Rand Paul, criticizing Mullin's previous comments.
I will work hard each day. I'll work hard to make the 280,000 employees at DHS with the 22 agencies that's underneath me proud.
My experience with you has been consistent kindness and professionalism. In this town, you got to get along and find a way to work together. And now we have to come at it and just let things go in the past for that.
I know you will represent us very well. You will represent the administration very well. You will make our country safer.
And so while everyone else was shaking hands and meeting people, he was digging through the debris field to find a way to be able to shut off the water that was shooting through the middle of that destroyed elementary school.
You told the media that I was a freaking snake and that you completely understood why I had been assaulted.
I said I could understand because of the behavior you were having, that I can understand why the neighbor did what he did. I can have different opinions with everybody in this room, but as Secretary of Homeland, I'll be protecting everybody, including Kentucky, as much as I will my own backyard in Oklahoma.
You will be confirmed. You will have the job, and you're going to make this country safer and better.
Trump chose Mullin to lead the DHS earlier this month to replace Kristi Noem, saying Mullin will work to tirelessly secure the southern border and fight crime. During today's hearing, Mullin called for department funding to be restored. Democrats and Republicans are split on funding the agency and ending the partial DHS shutdown. The disputes center on policy changes to ICE operations. Democrats want to fund other agencies within the department like TSA and FEMA, but Republicans say that funding cannot be separated from the rest of DHS.
But we have to get DHS funded. We're putting our homeland and the peace of mind at risk for the American people. Sometimes it's political theater, sometimes it's true differences. But what we do know is that we're playing with fire. We have 280,000 DHS employees right now that are on day 30 without pay, and they're still showing up every single day to do their job. That is a dedicated group of people. And we should all be proud of them. We should all be working together, and we should all be trying to fund them.
If the Senate confirms Mullin, he's slated to replace Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem on March 31st. And the White House has a new proposal in its bid to get funding for the Department of Homeland Security. Trump administration officials detailing key concessions in a letter sent to Republican Senators Susan Collins and Katie Britt. In the letter obtained by Fox News, those concessions include expanding the use of body cameras worn by immigration agents and limiting immigration enforcement at sensitive locations, including schools and churches. The letter also says the administration will ensure that DHS law enforcement officers have visible ID and that officers will state their agency and identification when asked. This doesn't apply to undercover officers. The letter adds the administration will codify its current practice of not knowingly detaining a U.S. citizen unless the person violates a state or federal law. The concessions don't address two concerns voiced by Democrats, which are a requirement that immigration agents obtain judicial warrants and prohibiting federal agents from wearing masks. The letter ended saying Democrats must stop holding the safety and security of the American people hostage and move forward with full funding for the DHS. As the funding fight over Homeland Security continues, the consequences for airports could be huge. One TSA official telling Fox and Friends some smaller airports could be forced to shut down.
We're doing absolutely everything we can. We have a national deployment office force, and we've fully depleted that. So at this point, we're fully stretched. And so, frankly, there's not much else we can do. As the weeks continue, if this continues, it's not hyperbole to suggest that we may have to quite literally shut down airports, particularly smaller ones, if call-out rates go up and we can't, a lot of these officers can't afford to come in.
DHS says overall absences among TSA airport security officers was more than 10% on Monday for the second day in a row. As a result, the lines at several airports remain very long. Some 50,000 TSA officers have been working without pay for the last month due to the budget standoff. Adam Stahl yesterday urged Democrats to come back to the table and get a funding bill passed. Union leaders warning every available financial option has been exhausted, saying many TSA workers are coping with eviction notices, vehicle repossessions, empty refrigerators, and overdrawn bank accounts. The State Department has added a dozen countries to a list, now bringing it up to 50 countries. whose citizens must post bond to apply for a U.S. visa. The Trump administration says the measure has already prevented individuals from staying in the country after their visas expire. According to the department, citizens from countries on the list must post a bond of $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000. The amount is determined at the time of the visa interview. Citizens from countries added to the list today must post bond starting April 2nd. The Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates steady. Fed Chair Jerome Powell provided an update today following the central bank's meeting.
Near-term measures of inflation expectations have risen in recent weeks, likely reflecting the substantial rise in oil prices caused by the supply disruptions in the Middle East. Most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation this year is 2.7% and 2.2% next year, a bit higher than projected in December.
The Fed left short-term interest rates at 3.5% to 3.75% unchanged for its second straight meeting. The central bank projected a single rate cut for the year. Economic growth was projected at 2.4% for 2026. Fed officials expected the unemployment rate to remain unchanged at 4.4%. Powell's comments come amid ongoing U.S. strikes against Iran, adding that it was too soon to determine the impact of the war on the U.S. economy. And joining us now to discuss this is Stephen Cates, financial analyst for Bankrate. Stephen, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. So talk to us more about the Fed decision today. What went into it? What was the thinking here?
So coming into this meeting, this was universally expected that they would be holding rates where they are. I think the interesting parts of this is really the commentary that Jerome Powell is providing in the press conference, as well as the information that we're getting from the summary of economic projections. Clearly, inflation is now the bigger concern. We saw that Christopher Waller, who was a dissent earlier, now is back on the train with the rest of the committee, wanting to hold here. So I think we're seeing that now, and at many of the meetings in the future, we're likely to see them continue to hold until more clarity is possible.
Okay, so you said inflation is the bigger focus here. So I want to ask you this, because the Fed looks at core inflation more closely, which excludes volatile energy prices. So then what is the dynamic here when the Fed officials are seeing oil prices spiking, sometimes over $100 a barrel?
Well, one of the things is, although that is certainly an impact for consumers, and I think that they recognize that. I think anybody who's gone to the gas pump recently has noticed a big change. But more importantly, it is the flow through to the other parts of the economy that could be more impactful. You look at diesel prices and what that means for shipping throughout the country, something that domestic shippers, anybody who's getting groceries from farms to stores, that is going to impact prices. And that is something that is going to flow through all the arteries of the economy. And it isn't something that we're going to be able to sidestep just because you might have, let's say, an electric car.
So by your estimate, is raising rates at all on the table, or is that not an option at the Fed?
Great question. Interestingly enough, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta is showing some data that there is possibly an even chance between a rate cut and a rate hike by June. But, ultimately, those market odds change week to week, even day to day. We're certainly in a volatile environment where information is coming fast and coming quickly. I don't think that a hike is on the table, to be honest with you. I think that we're not going to likely get the cuts that we expected earlier in the year. I think one cut might even be pushing it. It's just something that puts us in a position where we are today, and the fact that the unknowns are greater than the knowns. We might be perpetually one or two meetings away from this cut that we keep talking about but never get.
Okay, Stephen, I want to follow up another question on what you said about the Fed is focusing on inflation more. Do you think this is largely due to the war affecting the economy, or do you think there's something more fundamental within the economy that is making the Fed think this way?
I think that the conflict in Iran certainly puts it over the top. The spiking oil prices, the unknown impacts of how long that's going to go on, or the total intensity of that impact. But, if we look back at the personal consumption expenditures, that's the Fed's favorite measure for inflation. We have data from January only to this point, and we were seeing accelerating inflation even then. That's 2 months prior to this conflict. So we can't say that oil prices were the factor there, that unknowns about the conflict were the factor there. We simply saw services inflation rising, and that's something that the Fed can't ignore.
So Powell said today that the U.S. economy is on solid footing. But let me get your reaction to the PPI report that we got today, higher than expected, coupled with the 92,000 loss of jobs in February. So higher inflation and losing jobs. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I think that we did see a loss of jobs in February, but we also saw a large gain of jobs in January. And if you average those out, it's still a positive jobs number year to date in 2026. So, we can't take any singular month as gospel. We have to look at this over many months and look at the trend of where things are going. The labor market is mixed at the moment. We have low layoffs, but also very low hiring. If you have a job and you're secure in that, you're in a decent position. Unemployment is still relatively low. If you don't have a job, you're very downtrodden at this point. You're feeling frustrated and you're not liking the position you're in because getting a job is very hard. So the labor market is in this uneasy equilibrium where we're not rapidly losing jobs, but we're also not gaining any. And so that puts people in a tough position depending on where they are personally. Inflation is rising, and I think that for the moment, with the labor market, again, in this kind of uneasy equilibrium, in a stable but weak position, inflation has to be the focus.
All right, Stephen, let me just ask you one final question here. Can you elaborate just a bit further on what you think is the future path of interest rates at the central bank?
Well, again, this could be a pretty stale take, in a couple of weeks, let alone a couple of months. But I think that we're probably not going to see a rate cut until the earliest, the third quarter of this year. I think July is probably off the table. Maybe we'd see that in September. But depending on how long this conflict goes, and again, what we see from inflation measures over the next few months, we could be looking at a cut in Q4 or none at all.
Okay, well, it's been very great to speak with you, Stephen. Thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
NTD's upcoming exclusive documentary titled Unbroken, the untold story of Shen Yun, is premiering March 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Joining us now to talk about it is Steve Lance, NTD's senior investigative journalist and the executive producer of Unbroken. So, Steve, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm actually really looking forward to this interview. So, can you just start off by providing with us some context for this film? What is it? What is it about? Why did you guys make it? Why now?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on your program, Don. And so, as some of the viewers might have seen, whether in their cities or through different reports on NTD, Shen Yun Performing Arts, it's a classical Chinese dance company with a tagline, China before communism. And what comes along with presenting such things is a lot of interference, a lot of transnational repression, and you really become the ire of the Chinese Communist Party. And this group has been a victim of a transnational repression campaign that has morphed into a sophisticated, covert influence campaign stemming from Beijing, where they've managed to make their way into the United States. And really, what we've found and what we've uncovered in this film and really put the pieces together, they have been able to manipulate some of America's most trusted and prized institutions and in some cases, federal agencies. Unwittingly, I will say, with the federal agencies, maybe not so much on some of the media companies that have been carrying water for Beijing, particularly the New York Times.
So you're talking about the CCP's transnational repression influence campaigns. So talk to us about your experience then working with Shen Yun. What are the people in Shen Yun like?
Well, that's a great question, and it was sort of one of the most eye-opening experiences for me. I've actually seen the performance before, so I knew what they were presenting on stage was, traditional Chinese culture, just really perfection in terms of the artistry. But after we started to ask Shen Yun for access, and we were granted access behind the scenes, you can see some of the B-roll there on screen. We were able to go backstage, watch their process, watch them perform, and really get a sense of what it's like for these. They're really like Olympians, these athletes, and they're just the level of discipline that goes into what you finally see on stage was really spectacular from an audience member standpoint, to kind of get that exclusive behind the scenes look at what it takes to be able to present something on stage. And as I mentioned, we were fortunate enough as we started to ask, could we see where you guys train, where the dancers study? We were granted access to the campus up in upstate New York in a small town near Middletown, New York. And I have to say, the grounds there, the traditional Tang Dynasty temple grounds, and some of the facilities which were state of the art, were really spectacular for us. It was quite unexpected and a really pleasant experience.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is really the untold story of Shen Yun. And I myself did watch the trailer as well to this film. Really powerful. I mean, I've heard people who were moved to tears simply just watching this trailer. Can you just tell us, what do you think audiences will get out of this? How will they feel after watching this, and what will they understand?
Yeah, so the film itself has sort of two tracks, if you will. One is the one where we follow a few of the Shen Yun dancers. Particularly, there's two brothers that are lead dancers, primary dancers in Shen Yun Performing Arts. And you'll be able to experience Shen Yun through their eyes, through their experience, waking up early and training, and some of the bittersweet moments of wrapping up a long, grueling 6-month tour and meeting with their parents overseas. They travel a lot, Australia, Taiwan, and it really gives you a very rare glimpse into the life of a Shen Yun dancer. The other track is the unfortunate story, which is the investigative part, where sort of my role comes in, and we start to explore some of the connections to some media reports that have started about a year and a half, 2 years ago from the New York Times. It was a rather unusual set of circumstances where the New York Times started targeting this group, and it was 1 article, 2 articles, 3 articles, and then you start to take notice and say, what is going on here? For many viewers who consume news, for the New York Times, the paper of record in the United States, to start to give 3, 4, 5, now we're up to articles on a particular subject. It's very unusual. It's just a lot of editorial ink. And so that's when we started asking around some of the reports that they were talking about abuse and different things. So we started to call Shen Yun, and we wanted to speak to the people that are there and experience it for ourselves. And that's when the investigation really kicked off. And we were able to sort of look at a lot of the New York Times reporting and see that there were a lot of flaws in their reporting. And where it ultimately led us to was a directive, a leaked directive that came out of Beijing over the past few years with a specific direction to manipulate U.S. institutions, media, and different organizations using a variety of tactics, including the United Front Work Department, which is a covert sort of parallel apparatus to the CCP's central government to carry out soft power, influence, and espionage operations. And I think that the viewers will find it very interesting if they make it to the film and watch it on next Tuesday, the 24th.
Okay, there's one thing, Steve, maybe you can clarify for some of our viewers who may not understand, some of them. Why is the CCP, through its influence operations, transnational repression, targeting a dance group? When you think about influence operations, you think maybe military bases, technology, but this is a dance show.
Yeah, that's another great question, Don. It doesn't make much sense on the on the surface. And it sort of goes back into the story of Shen Yun, the founding of Shen Yun. And if you look at that tagline, of course, China before communism, that tells a bit of a story too as to why they might not be pleased. But Shen Yun was founded, I want to say around 2006, and it had a mission to restore traditional Chinese culture. And at the same time, it was founded by a group of folks who practiced the meditation discipline called Falun Dafa or Falun Gong. And the story is really in their faith, because ultimately that is what is being attacked here. And Falun Gong, as many of the viewers may have heard of, was introduced in 1992 inside of China. And by 1998, in 6 short years, according to the Chinese Communist Party's own internal census, they found out that roughly 100 million people started to practice this meditation discipline. And so the dictator at the time, his name was Jiang Zemin, he condemned it in 1999, completely banned it, systematically started to round up practitioners of this practice and put them in forced labor camps, torture, murder, eventually evolving into forced organ harvesting. And along with that came a major propaganda campaign to defame the practice, thereby sort of handcuffing the West and different democracies around the world that have typically been outspoken advocates for such crimes against humanity, whether it be Tibetan Buddhists, we see them talking about Uyghur Muslims. But Falun Gong was relatively unknown. And so that propaganda really set in, and a lot of people were confused. And as I mentioned, this is a crime against humanity that wound up and is still ongoing, according to many reports, that has led to forced live organ harvesting. And so Shen Yun have, many of their performers have friends, family, brothers and sisters who have been tortured to death inside of China. So it's very mission driven in the sense that on the one hand, they're offering this really beautiful art form that depicts traditional Chinese culture, but there's 1 or 2 vignettes that actually talk about what's taking place in current modern China. And some of those things don't really look great for the Chinese Communist Party. So you might expect that they are not big fans of Shen Yun, unfortunately.
And certain pieces in Shen Yun actually depict this horrendous practice of forced organ harvesting in China, which some of our guests have called just diabolical. Steve, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I just have a couple of personal questions that I'm wondering, because I've heard about this film coming out for a very long time. Can you just talk to us about why the name Unbroken? What does it mean?
Yeah, well, if you watch the film, you'll know why it's called Unbroken. And when you are faced with your families being persecuted, relentless, as we mentioned at the top of the interview, transnational repression attacks by the CCP. We're talking in the United States. Transnational repression means a state actor, China, acting on United States soil to persecute you. And what do I mean by that? They've sent Shen Yun bomb threats. The MC, his name's Lishai Lamish, you'll see him in the documentary, personally receiving death threats. Same with some of the other characters, Levi Browdy, father to the 2 boys that you see on the screen there. Personal death threats, tires slashed in their buses as they travel, harassment, the theaters that they go to, given binders full of propaganda, defaming them. And yet, under all of these attacks, in the New York Times, 12 hit pieces and counting, really, unfortunate for Shen Yun that they would be carrying water for the Beijing CCP. And here we are, 12 hit pieces later, all of the things that, we just mentioned, and they're still performing. They're going to be actually opening up on the 25th. Our premiere is on the 24th. They're in Lincoln Center. It's sort of the crown jewel of their tour. And, they're just making their way through amidst all of the interference and things that have been thrown at them. And it's quite a story.
Yeah, that's just incredible. Just one final question, really quick. What's the easiest way? How can our viewers see this movie?
NTD.com. It's simple as that. There's also, we're launching NTD Plus, so NTD.com, I believe it might be /plus, But if you go to ntd.com on the 24th at 7 p.m., you should be able to watch it. And there will be a little bit of a special coverage before, during, and then we're going to have a special Q&A with many of the dancers. There's going to be a red carpet event, and many of the dancers and some of the folks in the film are going to be joining us for a question and answer session after the premiere. So stay tuned for that.
Well, all right, Steve, really appreciate you giving us your time today. And to our viewers and everyone watching this, you don't want to miss this documentary. Okay, Steve, thank you.
Don Ma, thanks.
Here at NTD, a special worldwide premiere is coming up next week. After our conversation, we want to give you a closer look at the story, one that explores art, faith, and resilience under pressure. Here's a first look.
For athletes, dancers, everything you do has to be perfect.
Oh!
On our way to Ozzy.
Oi. My guy goes, come on, get up. We gotta do this.
Like, bring it in more. People have called us the #1 show in the world.
Lovely job, guys.
Thank you.
I just hope I can continue this career for as long as I can, because I don't want anything else in the world.
But never would I have imagined what battle I joined.
Hey, buddy. You guys are okay?
There's like a huge team of people just combing the seats while we're on stage preparing for the show with dogs and stuff.
Specifically targeting Shen Yun Performing.
No one wants to hear a bomb threat to the institution where your children are.
We had a sense of anticipation. We didn't know how it would go.
This is not a normal cut. This was done with the purpose of the tire exploding on the highway.
This is crazy.
These are open Chinese spy organizations.
They've gotten threats to shoot up the performance.
All the noise and all the distractions around you.
This is a machine that can be used against any American.
Why are they doing this? How much more of this are we going to be able to take? We feel like we're at war.
This is not going to stop us. We can't let it stop us.
Sound check.
What can I do to tell people our side? This tour is our chance to do it.
Doesn't matter what the obstacles are.
We're doing this together.
Power is back at Denver International Airport after an outage earlier today. The FAA has lifted its full ground stop, but disruptions continue to impact travelers. The airport says operations are beginning to resume. Power was restored at around 11 a.m. local time, or roughly 2 hours after the outage started. The power outage caused over 410 flight delays and shut down the train system connecting the main terminal and the gates. Travelers say heavy crowds near trains and flight delays persist even after the power came back on. During the outage, planes had to wait on the tarmac and passengers were not allowed to deplane. An FAA ground stop prevented additional planes from landing at Denver Airport for about an hour and a half. The travel disruptions came amid a partial DHS funding lapse as TSA staff members are working without pay. A state-sponsored campaign sustained by the large-scale murder of prisoners of conscience. A new book titled Killed to Order exposes the Chinese Communist Party's crime of forced organ harvesting. NTD's Sam Wong was at the book launch, and just a warning to viewers, some may find the images in this report disturbing.
From a geopolitical standpoint, if the person negotiating across the table from you would just as soon sell your liver, then it's not a very good negotiation.
If this is how the people running the Chinese Communist Party treat the people of China, imagine what they would do to us.
A state-backed, multi-billion-dollar industry that executes people on demand for their organs. The Epoch Times senior editor Yanya Kellick has been tracking China's human rights violations for decades. In his new book, Kill to Order, he documents how the Chinese Communist Party has been harvesting organs from living prisoners of conscience, an egregious act still happening at scale to this day.
I did not know until I read Jan's book about how well developed this is in China. And it was a bit of a shock to me, but a wake-up call to all of us. I think we need to recommit ourselves as a civilization to the bodily integrity of every person, to the inherent dignity of all human life, and made in the image and likeness of God.
Yakalik launched this book at the Trump Kennedy Center on Monday night, joined by actor and comedian Rob Schneider. Through decades of research, Kill to Order unpacks the scale and scope of the CCP's transplant abuse, a system that involves military hospitals and the Chinese security apparatus. The number one target of this campaign is Falun Gong, a spiritual group that's been brutally persecuted in China since 1999. Today, Falun Gong practitioners are still facing harassment, incarceration, torture, and even death for their faith.
I attended an art exhibit in Fremont, California at a small Asian gallery, and the canvases there were about the CCP abuse of the Falun Gong. And some of those canvases were unforgettable, and I've been sort of semi-active in the issue ever since. But I'm looking forward to learning more in this book by Jan.
In 2019, a UK independent tribunal concluded that forced organ harvesting has been committed by the CCP for years. The panel also says that Falun Gong practitioners have been, quote, one and probably the main source of organ supply.
When I look at the CCP, forced organ harvesting is the end for them. It began with waging a war on their ancestors. That's what the Cultural Revolution was. Then it was a war on their posterity. That's their children. That's what the one-child policy was. And what is organ harvesting? It's cannibalism. They ate their ancestors, they ate their children, and now the CCP is eating itself.
Last week, a bipartisan bill titled the Falun Gong and Victims of Forced Organ Harvesting Protection Act was introduced in the Senate. The legislation would impose sanctions on those who were complicit in the crime. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Sam Wang, NTD News.
Could U.S. action on Cuba be right around the corner? President Trump has made several comments in recent days that he's considering taking Cuba. To share her insights on this, we have Christine Balling, former U.S. Defense Advisor for Latin America and Senior Vice President for Professional Affiliations at the Institute of World Politics. Christine, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome. President Trump has said in recent days that he's considering taking Cuba in some form and that action will take place soon. Can I just start off by asking you, what do you make of these comments? What is he talking about?
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, as the president is often want to do, he's fairly general with his statements. I think what he's signaling is, as has been the plan for some time, is to continue to place the Western Hemisphere as one of the top national security priorities. Actually, technically, this region is the top priority. So the Cuban regime, as it is, having inherited the power from the Castro brothers, has been an enemy of the United States for decades and decades. So while obviously the president isn't going to talk specifics right now, he's making it clear to the American people and to the world that once again, he means business when it comes to ensuring that this hemisphere as a whole is safer, secure, and more prosperous.
So, Christine, can you just go a bit deeper into the issue of how does this benefit America? How does action on Cuba matter to Americans?
Well, as it happens, the Cuban intelligence apparatus, known as G2, has been incredibly damaging to our national security. I know that most Americans don't know this, but despite the fact that it's a very poor country, the Cuban G2 was very well trained by the Soviets and the East Germans back in the day, and they've been continuing to punch above their weight for years. For example, it was only 3 years ago where a Cuban spy who had been served as the U.S. ambassador to Bolivia, he was a member of the National Security Council and a special advisor to the commander of U.S. Southern Command, was arrested having been spying for Cuba for 40 years. So in a sense, this guy named Victor Rocha was sharing incredibly sensitive intelligence with Cuba for 40 years. What do they do with that intelligence? Well, they certainly use it to their own advantage when it comes to any American activities against Cuba, but they can also sell it. And they have been known to sell the intelligence to our other adversaries like Russia.
Okay, I see. So if we're talking about Cuba right now as it stands, by your assessment, does it have any ability to put up resistance to the U.S. In terms of whatever action the U.S. might take, or is the only option for Cuba is to fully collaborate with the U.S.? What is your analysis?
Well, for one, we need to be very careful, and I'm no doubt we will be in terms of how we proceed and what we do and what the goal is. I mean, the fact of the matter is I certainly do not anticipate any military intervention, but having said that, the Cuban military, of course, is no match to the U.S. military. Certainly, they can continue to use the propaganda method by saying that, look, the United States is cutting us off from our energy, from our ability to have fresh water, food. So they can try to rally the world in their favor, presenting themselves as a victim. But the bottom line is, I think that we have a very good chance of overthrowing, I should say, this regime in one way or the other, because the Cuban people themselves, while they're loyalists, they are very, very, I think, ready to be free in terms of free trade and living in a democracy. So I don't anticipate the level of resistance by the populace that some pro-Cuban folks online are saying.
Okay, just to clarify, do you mean we're going to see potentially a change in leadership that leads to democracy?
Yes, well, I think that is 100% a requirement. I don't see that it would be possible that, for example, if the current president were to be removed or stepped down, that would be enough. The entire power structure, including the power structure of the military, would need to be dismantled for any hope of real change.
Okay, understood. So before I ask you the next question here, I brought a clip of Secretary of State Marco Rubio with him commenting on Cuba Tuesday. Let's just take a quick look at that.
It's a non-functional economy. It's an economy that has survived. That revolution, it's not even a revolution, that thing they have has survived on subsidies from the Soviet Union and now from Venezuela. They don't get subsidies anymore, so they're in a lot of trouble. And the people in charge, they don't know how to fix it. So they have to get new people in charge.
So talk to us a little bit about Cuba's economy right now and what appears to be instability within Cuba.
Yes, well, as Secretary of State Rubio suggests, I mean, it is a mess. It's not a free economy. The government controls essentially the exchange of goods and services. The military owns all the hotels, for example. So Cuba does have a certain degree of tourism, closed off to the United States, of course, at this time, but that's all controlled by the government. So that the benefits do not trickle down to the people. Certainly, if we are to intervene in Cuba, it is to be expected that we will have to offer some sort of economic support. Perhaps whatever shape the reimagined USAID organization is, that they would have to, that group under the State Department would definitely have to set up some program before a free economy would be functioning. It's unrealistic to say that even if the regime were overturned or overthrown tomorrow, the Cubans would need outside support to get the economy, a free economy, up and running. So that should be part of the administration's plan.
Okay, I want to ask you this, and it may seem like an obvious question, but I think it's still worth articulating clearly. How does the Cuban people feel? Put it into words for us about the country's leadership.
Well, they're oppressed. I mean, very much as in the case in Venezuela, those who oppose or speak out against the government are thrown in jail and tortured. There are Cubans on the island who have family members in the United States who've escaped. So we really do get a legitimate idea as to what the Cuban people, how they feel about the regime. Of course, they can't say it publicly, so they can communicate online occasionally, but certainly through family members. As I said, I think that the Cubans would welcome intervention with open arms. It was a great country before the Castros, the so-called revolution, and it can be a great country again.
Okay, just one final question here, Christine. I mean, it feels to me, I don't know if my feeling is correct or not, you can tell me, but it feels like Cuba is potentially on the edge or on the verge of, the government that is, on the verge of collapsing and, you know, having a transition to a different government with new leadership. Is my feeling correct? How close or how far away is the current Cuban government to collapsing?
Well, I think we're close, and two indications. Certainly, the population is not going to stand for no water, no electricity, no food for very long, and protests have already started, including against the building where the Communist Party is housed, and that sort of thing was not happening before the U.S. started talking about intervening. And number two, I don't think President Trump would be speaking so frequently in the recent days as he has if something were not imminent, just coming up soon.
Okay, Christine, really enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you.
A suspect runs away and into a river, forcing deputies to borrow paddle boats to finish the job. This is happening in Florida. Take a look.
Watch a foot chase in Florida turn into a paddleboard pursuit after authorities took to the water on boards to nab a fleeing suspect. It started when Volusia County deputies were questioning a man in the Daytona Beach area when he suddenly took off, sparking a foot pursuit that went from marathon to maritime when he jumped in the nearby Halifax River. A deputy, along with a Daytona Beach shore officer, hopped on paddleboards and continued the pursuit, which ended predictably with the suspect treading water and needing some help. He was brought to shore and, according to Volusia County Sheriff's Office, is being held on a $1,500 bond, facing charges for loitering, prowling, and resisting arrest. He couldn't be reached for comment, but I must note this sprinting/swimming suspect's name, and I swear I'm not making this up, is Chase Cruz.